Hello, this is Sarah with Soiled Plant, and today I'd like to go over my Calathea collection. Ever since I started my houseplant collection, Calathea have always been some of my favorites. The foliage is beautiful. I tend to be on the overwatering side of things, so I figured these would be a good plant to start with. And they have a reputation for being very fussy, and there is good reason for that. And I'll show you every Calathea I have, even the bad ones. I'll talk about the ones that are no longer with us and kind of the struggles that I've had to overcome in order to have a sustainable Calathea collection. So first I'll start off with where I keep my Calatheas in my house. So just to the left of me are two windows that are east facing. Now, even though they're east facing, there is a building pretty close by and a big tree, so it's very, very scattered light. It almost gives off enough light to be considered maybe a north facing window. The table behind me is fairly long. It's about 6 feet long. So the Calathea I have on this far end are about 6 to 8 feet from that window. That is not nearly enough light to have Calathea thrive. So they're generally lower to medium light plants, or at least that's how they're sold in stores. I've found that they generally like medium indirect light the best. If you notice any of your Calathea losing coloring, or the backs of the leaves that normally have a very dark sort of maroon color to them, and they start fading, you'll know that they are getting too much light. So there are certain plants out there that if they start losing their color, like a croton, if they're losing their color, that means that they're getting not enough light. Calatheas are the opposite, because Calatheas generally in the wild are going to be kind of ground cover. So it's under that first canopy and it's under the second canopy, and they don't climb. They don't climb, they don't vine. So they are generally going to stay close to the ground under the base of trees and things like that. So that means if, you know, your foliage is losing some of that lovely dark maroon color on the bottom, give it a little less light. I also want to point out that when I say my Calathea collection, I'm also including Stromanthe and Maranta. I have more Calathea than I do the other ones, and I only have one Maranta, but I'm going to include all of them that are kind of under the Marantae family. So let's start with the plants I have in front. These ones are in front and not on my table because they were either rehabilitating or I have them in my greenhouse. So let's start with the Calathea White Fusion right here in front. This one I keep in my greenhouse that I have inside. These ones love humidity more than any other Calathea I've ever owned. They get brown tips very easily. I have quite a few that have brown tips right now, including some of these lower leaves that I'm losing at the moment. It's still growing and it's got a bunch of shoots, so I'm not necessarily upset that some of the leaves are browning. That's just kind of the nature of owning Calatheas. So a Calathea White Fusion is actually the first Calathea I ever bought. This is not that original Calathea. So that Calathea, I didn't have enough humidity in my house, I wasn't watering it the proper amount, and it quickly dwindled away to little sticks and promptly died. Now with Calathea, if they die back and they still have the stump and the little base stems there, they can rehabilitate themselves. And a lot of time with Calathea, if they grow in the environment that you give them when they're from little stumps, generally that means that they're going to be a little more resilient, a little more tolerant to any of the conditions you're giving it. When my Calathea White Fusion went back down into stumps and I was determined to rehabilitate it, it did start growing new leaves. Now, the reason that wasn't successful is because one of my cats decided to chew them back down into stumps. The Calathea White Fusion has very, very, very delicate, very thin leaves, so they're very susceptible to pests and also my cat, as it turns out. So original plant, sticks, went back down into stumps, cat chewed off the leaves. Didn't deter me. I moved the position away from where my cat could reach it, and it started to grow back again. Lo and behold, it got spider mites, pretty much instantly went back down to stumps again. So that means for a third time that white fusion had to rehabilitate itself, and every single time it was getting smaller and smaller, as you would expect. And eventually the leaves just weren't happy. You could tell that they were struggling, the plant was struggling, and the leaves just naturally decayed on their own again, even when I was giving it good conditions. So it got to the point where I kind of gave up on it, threw it out, decided to start from scratch. I picked up this one about a month and a half ago. It's already got a couple of little brown spots, but since I've gotten the greenhouse, it tends to be doing much better. The Calathea White Fusion has a reputation of being one of the fussiest Calatheas, and I would pretty much agree with that. There are a couple Calathea that I would categorize as too fussy, to the point where I wouldn't even have them anymore, and this one I decided to try again. So I'm going to take this one and put it back in the greenhouse so that it is still in its optimal conditions. So now that we're done with the white fusion, I will introduce you to the Calathea Rosiopicta Dottie. There are many Calathea Rosiopicta varieties. They generally have the same round leaf shape, the kind of ripples along the inside. They can be smooth, but generally they're the rounder leaves with kind of a circular pattern on the inside. I've had a few in the past, and the Dottie is the only one I still have. So I at one point had a Rosiopicta Cora, and I've also had the Medallion, which is a common one that you see in plant stores a lot. I lost the Cora to spider mites. I didn't notice it fast enough, and it had already deteriorated a majority of the plant, and it never quite recovered. The standard Calathea Rosiopicta Medallion I would classify in the upper tier of fussy Calathea. I was watering the Medallion the same as every other Calathea I own. It didn't have pests or anything like that, but they deteriorate so quickly for me that I've decided that the standard Medallion is just, I don't have the right conditions for it. And I've heard of people on social media who say Medallions are so easy and mine's gigantic and I don't even have a humidifier, and it's just like, that's not me apparently. So whatever is wrong with how I take care of houseplants, the Medallion and I do not get along. So I have given up on the Medallion, but I do really, really like the Dottie. So this one is a Dottie I ordered online during the winter, and it was about this big when I bought it. And pretty quickly all of the leaves died back. Now that was a mistake on my part. I was too eager to get it, but I did keep the plant, and you see all these brand new leaves. They've all sprouted up in the past couple of weeks to a month. So I think that this one's gonna survive and it's gonna be okay. Now I did go out and get another full one, because I think what was wrong with this one was the humidity wasn't high enough, and it might have had a pest, because I tend to get spider mites frequently and I haven't managed to eradicate them yet, but I treat my plants pretty regularly to the point where if they're there, I'm keeping them at bay enough so that they're not killing the plants. You know what I'm saying? And with Calathea, a lot of times when you bring them home, you're going to lose a few leaves while it acclimates to your home. Don't panic. Don't think that the plant is dying or it's not happy. If you see any drying on new leaves or leaves that are not the oldest, smallest leaves at the base, then you have a problem. But on this one in particular, I've got it in the greenhouse. It's extra humid, extra nice and warm, good light for it, and I'm still losing some bottom leaves. That's to be expected. Of course, you can always check it for spider mites, things like that, but generally it's doing very, very well. I will say with this one, it's been in rehabilitation because I wasn't sure if what killed it was something I did or if it was spider mites. So I've got this kind of in a quarantine spot that I have these next two Calatheas in, and it's still doing okay. It's not getting brown tips or anything like that. So that just goes to show when things grow in your environment, it's more acclimated and it tends to do better, whereas this one is still shedding leaves at the moment. So that is the Calathea Rosiopicta Dottie. So the next plant I'd like to talk about is the Calathea Zebrina. So you'll notice that there's a lot of brown tipping going on with these. Little tiny one there, but this one's almost gone. This was a gigantic plant when I got it, and unfortunately spider mites got a hold of this one. Calathea Zebrinas are one of the variety that get the velvety leaves on it, which are just fantastic. The other thing you'll notice is that the undersides are just green. They don't have that purpley maroonish backing to it. Because it has that velvety leaf to it, they attract dust sometimes, and also because the backs of the leaves are green, it's much harder to catch that they have spider mites. So I missed it for a long time. I missed that this had spider mites, and it decimated about half the plant before I caught it, because, well, spider mites can work really quickly if they've got a nice juicy plant that they really like. So this one has been rehabilitation for about a month and a half. I've kept the leaves that it had. These are all original leaves to the plant, and I've managed to keep those. The browning hasn't gotten much worse. When they get pretty bad, like this one here, where it's taken over more than, you know, a quarter to a fifth of the leaf, it will just continue to spread. But I keep these on here. This can still photosynthesize even though a lot of it is brown, so I keep it on there to help rejuvenate the plant. And I don't know if you can tell, but I do have some new growth on this. So we've got these two little bunny ears here. I've got a growth point right here, and then another one right here. So it's coming back, and it's actually rehabilitated quite a bit to the point where I think it's ready to go back on my Calathea shelf over here again. Now, I warned you that I would show you every Calathea I have. Prepare to see the worst Calathea I have. And there she is, the fussiest Calathea of all time, and this is the Calathea Ornata Pinstripe. I can't even. So this is the lone remaining leaf on my Ornata Pinstripe. I'll take the nursery pot out so you can see what I'm working with here. So I've taken the plant out of its cover pot. One thing I didn't mention is that with Calathea, I would highly recommend not potting in terracotta. It dries out the soil too much, and Calatheas really like to stay on the moist side of things. So I would recommend keeping them either in ceramic or plastic. Every single one of my Calathea are in plastic. I don't have any Calathea in anything other than plastic at the moment. But plastic's not cute, so I put them in cover pots. That's true of this Zebrina as well. You know, I've got it in a plastic pot and then have this very cute cover pot on it. So this is the second Calathea Ornata Pinstripe I've ever owned. The first one did something similar where it just started deteriorating. Nothing I did helped. More light, less light, more humidity. Nothing really worked on it. And I bought this one well after I was actually good at caring for Calathea, and it still did this. It was a huge bushy plant and just did this. Unfortunately, with this Ornata Pinstripe, I just think this is not the plant for me. I look at it and it falls apart. I love it and it hates me more. I leave it alone and it dies of neglect. Just nothing I do is good enough for this plant. So the reason I haven't thrown this thing out yet is because I have two growth points. Deep. Though this one is pretty high. Granted, this thing has not grown or moved in weeks, but there is another itty bitty, like you can't even see it, it's barely poking through the soil, another little stump growing and trying to become a plant. So I'll keep this as long as it tries to survive. I keep this one in my little rehabilitation zone, which has 4 plants in it. 3 of them are Calathea, the Zebrina, the small Rosiopicta Dottie, and then another plant. So this one's going to stay in that rehabilitation zone until it can prove that it wants to live. It has not shown me that yet, but you gotta prove, we gotta work together. Come on. So now we're going to move on to the plants behind me. I'll bring each of them forward so that I can talk about them individually. Now this beaut needs no introduction, but I will do my best. This is a Calathea Ornata. These are so unique. There is not really another Calathea out there quite like it. They have these little brush strokes of gray on the inside of the leaf that are just beautiful. Now this one's kind of like the Zebrina, where the back sides of the leaf are light green. It is the same color as the front, basically. It doesn't have that maroon, dark red backing to it. This one was in the same shipment as that original Dottie that died back. So this one I ordered from plantarena.com, and nothing against her. Everything shipped beautifully. The plant that arrived was just phenomenal and full and beautiful, and everything was perfect about it. But I ordered it in the winter. So not only is the plant trying to acclimate to my house versus a greenhouse, it also had to deal with winter travel. Even with a heat pack, that can be pretty stressful on the plant. So I got a lot of browning. I lost quite a few leaves, but I've gotten to the point now where I think it's happy. The new leaves were dying off because of either under or over watering, and I was having a real problem trying to kind of meet that balance. So actually my solution was to try a new pot, and this was a shot in the dark. So this pot is, you don't have to get this one necessarily, but it's basically a self-watering pot. So I've got this in plastic right here. You can see those roots coming through, they're crazy. And it's got a little puddle of water underneath. And this one's kind of fancy because it has a meter on it where it'll bob up and down and tell you when to water it. So when it gets down to about 1/3 of the way down, I will fill this little reservoir with distilled water, and it does pretty well. And it's doing so well that right now it actually has 4 growth points. And since I got it, before I put it in this pot, it wasn't growing at all, which means that my conditions were not ideal for it. So I've got it now where it gets good light, and I'm watering it the correct amount. It's not being overwatered, so it's not soggy, it's not dry, it's just perfect. This Calathea in particular really doesn't like to be wet and really doesn't like to be dry. Some Calatheas will tolerate one or the other. I'll consider getting more pots like this for my fussier Calatheas to keep that water balance perfect for them. And it seems so happy. It's got 4 growth points, it's coming up, and it's going to be a nice big bushy plant someday, I promise. Next I'm going to move on to my Stromanthe varieties. I have a Triostar, I have a sanguinea, and then a Magic Star. So all of these are kind of undergoing the same problem. They've all been attacked by spider mites, and I'm working on rehabilitating and keeping that down. These 2 have managed to get new growth points and things like that, which is a good sign that they're happy. This one hasn't yet. So I'm still treating it, I'm still working on it. This one also got attacked by my cat, if you can see the nice bite marks there. So this one's going through the ringer, and it's just not happy with me right now. So I am working on rehabilitating this, but it's not so bad that I have to put it off in a separate corner. My Magic Star here does have a new growth point, and it seems to be doing okay. Now my Triostar, I was able to catch the spider mites really early, and I'm treating for them. It's actually just got a treatment about 3 days ago, and I try to continue that even though I don't see any evidence of spider mites, just because they can very easily come back with a vengeance. So this one is going through some of the issues I was talking about with the backing of the leaves. So this is a brand new leaf that came out, and it's only about 1/3 purple and the rest of it is green. That means that this is getting too much light. The Stromanthe Triostar is the most common of these, but I'm noticing the other 2 a lot more in stores as well. So keep your eye out for them. The foliage is wonderful. It's got that nice paint stroke, lots of variegation with white going on. That is the reason why a lot of people like white fusions and things like that. So it has similar coloration, but these ones in general are not nearly as fussy. Mine are just fussy because they're going through a lot of treatments for spider mites right now. Next up on the list is my Calathea rufibarbra. Now this one I'm going to keep on my knee because it is a big old bushy plant. This one I tried keeping on my dining room table, and the cats love to chew on it, so a lot of the lower leaves are very chewed on. And I kept trying to build barricades around it to make sure that they didn't have a comfortable place to sit to chew on them, and that did not seem to deter them at all. They love chewing on this thing, so I've had to put it back on my Calathea plant shelf. Now the Calathea rufibarbra does have the dark purple undersides. It's also very fuzzy. They're not velvety and they're not glossy. They are literally fuzzy, like little hairs sticking up, and it's really kind of interesting. So this one is in kind of a crowded pot right now. I think the roots are a little crowded. So I've had this one dry out on me pretty fast. I'm not sure if that's typical or not. I waited too long to water this once, you know, an extra day or two, and the soil was bone dry. This thing, I don't know if it's because it's huge, but it soaks up water like a bandit. It's crazy. So I came home from work one day and all these leaves were just flat on the table, aside from a few in the middle. And I just panicked. A lot of them were bent and it looked like they were going to snap off. So actually what I did was I tied a little piece of twine around them and watered it, and I've been keeping the twine on there for a few days. This only happened, the underwatering only happened about a week ago. So I've kept it wrapped in twine to get those stems to re-harden so that hopefully I can save as many as possible, and it seems to be working. About a dozen of these leaves were laying flat on the table with their stems bent. And now when I pull this down and check on it, only one or two are bent. So I really think this is a good solution in case that ever happens to you. The soil for this one stays very dry, probably because of how big it is. It just sucks all the water out. So one thing I did, so if you buy plants from a Home Depot or a Lowe's, a lot of times you'll see these strings in the bottom of it and then a stake where it'll loop around. That's basically a self-watering device. So I ended up using it for this plant, and the plant, because of the shape of the pot versus the cashpo, it doesn't sit all the way in the bottom. So if I have this and I have water in the bottom of the pot, it'll continually suck that up so I don't have it drying out too fast on me again. This is another one that I would definitely have in consideration with the self-watering pot. So that is the Calathea rufibarbra. This is my Calathea warscewiczii, or better known as Velvet Touch. This one, like the Zebrina, has very velvety leaves. It has those nice dark undersides, unlike the Zebrina, and it's just, I honestly think this is my favorite Calathea. It's very tolerant of under and over watering, considering it's no, you know, philodendron or anything like that. It's not a pothos, but it's definitely the easiest. Well, the Marantas are always going to be easier, but this one would be my easiest true Calathea that I own, and you would never think that from looking at it. At least in my care, that's what I've experienced. So she's a little bit of a leaner, but you know, we still love her. Just the pattern on the leaves is fantastic. The one problem I've noticed with these is they will get brown tips even if they're happy, it seems like. So, you know, you kind of have to weigh that out if you're okay with that. You're always gonna have little brown leaves, but the rest of the plant is so incredibly gorgeous that it doesn't, you know, have brown tips all you want. Like, I love her so much. This one is fairly thirsty. It's kind of like the rufibarbra, where I pretty much touch the soil every day or every other day on this one to see if it needs any water. And this one, I can kind of tell if it needs water based on if the top of the soil is dry. As soon as the top of the soil feels even a little bit dry, you water it, and it loves it and it's super happy. It's also been growing pretty well in my care. I've got this one that's brand new, and I've got another shoot coming up. This one up here, I don't know if you can see it. Let me lower this for you. Woo! This one at the very top is brand new, and I've got another one getting ready to unfurl right now. And yeah, this one by far and away I think is my favorite Calathea, both when I weigh in care, difficulty, and appearance. This one's high up there, and I absolutely love it. And the velvety leaves just, oh, it's beautiful. I love, love, love it. Last but not least, I have my only Maranta, which is a Maranta Lemon Lime. This one is a weed. It grows so fast. Every day in the spring, it'll have anywhere between 4 and 8 new shoots coming up. I can't keep up with it. I've taken cuttings from it and replanted it in. It is just one of the fastest growers. Now, I had a disaster about 3 days ago where my cat got on the table here. I was able to catch her in time before she did too much damage, but she focused her ire on the Maranta. She ended up chewing off the tips of 3 brand new leaves that were unrolling, and I'm not even worried about it, because even though she chewed off and basically ruined 3 leaves, I can see 3 other leaves that are coming up, 4 other leaves. So right now it has 7 growth points. Like, this thing will not stop growing. So in terms of care, this one is by far the easiest. I kind of bought this plant as an afterthought. I'm not as into kind of the Maranta that will vine like this. The one with the red veins, which is a lot more common. It doesn't tickle my fancy for whatever reason. I liked the lemon lime okay. The pattern is very unique and it's super intriguing. It's just, for whatever reason, you know, it's never been my personal favorite as far as looks go, but you can't deny the results that this thing just loves to be alive and wants to grow nonstop. I'm having problems trying to come up with what I'm going to end up doing with this, whether I'm going to let it vine or I should start a second plant, continue putting more into the soil, what have you. Now this one does tolerate underwatering quite a bit. It doesn't like being overwatered at all. The watering style for this one, I gauge it more close to an alocasia, where it doesn't like being overwatered, but it can tolerate underwatering a little bit. You know, if you're using a moisture meter, this one can get down to a 3 and be just fine. I have experienced no brown tips on this one whatsoever, and it's growing very, very well in medium light and high light, because this one is actually closest to my grow lights, and it loves it. I think, honestly, part of me wants to take it away from the grow lights because I want it to stop growing. It's getting too big. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. It's going to take over half my table. This one is by far the best grower, easiest to care for. So if you are interested in this type of plant, you know, it'll reward you in spades. Now that I've shown you my collection, I want to reiterate some of the things I mentioned before. Never put it in a terracotta pot, keep it in plastic or in ceramic. When you transplant them or when you decide to split them up and propagate, I would disturb the roots as little as humanly possible. So let's say I wanted to split up this Stromanthe Triostar. What I would do is basically take the soil ball out of the pot and take a nice big sharp knife and cut it exactly down the middle, under the leaves of course, but you know, I would pick a spot and just cut straight through the soil ball and put them right back in a pot with supplemental soil. I would not try and remove any of the soil from the pot. If the undersides of the leaves are nice and purple, if they are purple on the undersides and they start fading and giving you kind of spotty coloring like this one, give it less light. If your foliage starts getting really, really green, if it's got variegation on it and you're losing that coloring, give it less light. They do not like direct sunlight, and they're very finicky when it comes to too much light, but that doesn't mean, you know, stick it in a dark corner or anything like that. You know, if it's close to a window and that starts to happen, move it 2 feet back, something like that. Just kind of slowly, steadily move it back, because the leaves aren't damaged. They're all fine and they're going to photosynthesize and be great. But if you want that extra, you know, beautiful color that these can, you know, display in optimal conditions, just, you know, slowly change your conditions until the Calathea looks the way you want and is happy and thriving. I maintain the humidity in my house by using automatic humidifiers. When I say automatic, that means I can set it to a certain humidity range and it'll automatically kick on when it's low and turn off when it reaches that point. So I've got a few humidifiers that are just basic turn on, turn off varieties, and that tends to make everything too humid. It starts getting wet, you start worrying about, you know, damage to your home, things like that. So I really like the automatic ones. This one is the Levoit, which you kind of see all over the place. I bought it because I noticed a lot of the plant YouTubers I follow loved it and had it and all that stuff. I think it's a little overkill. I don't use the warm mist feature. I found that it was causing fungal growth on the top of the soil and then on the plants themselves. So I tend to avoid using the warm mist, and I tend to keep my house on the warmer side anyway, so I don't necessarily need it to heat up the air around the house. But if you are interested in this type of humidifier, I can certainly link it below for you. It certainly does everything I need it to. It's fantastic. The customer service is really great. I had one that the humidity meter on it was just completely broken. I messaged a few videos of it running on full blast, even though the humidity was over 90% in the room at that time. And I just showed them video proving like, hey, this is what's happening. They told me to try a few things. They didn't work, so they ended up sending me a new unit. So I definitely like the customer service that Levoit offers, and they're certainly really good. And if you do want to use the warm mist because your air is cold, something like that, absolutely go for it. It's certainly, like, I would never get rid of it. It's certainly perfect for everything I need. It's just a little overkill. So if I was going to buy a new one in the future, I'd probably buy something with one less feature so that I can save a little bit of money. When it comes down to it, Calatheas really like humidity, and they like medium indirect light, and they like to keep their soil moist, but not wet, definitely not dry. So that pretty much sums up my Calathea collection. Thank you so much for watching this video. It was a slog. I know there was a lot to get through. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'm a teeny tiny brand new YouTuber, so every little bit helps. Thank you for watching. Thank you for visiting my channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!